Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you send us, unpack them, and try to find those core insights, those aha moments.
Hmm.
You sent in a pretty hefty review article this time, and today we're tackling the Situated Expectancy Value Theory, SAVT for short.
That's ADT.
Our goal, to figure out what this theory says drives our choices, our performance, where it all started, and why it matters.
Exactly. And this theory, it goes back a bit. Developed initially by Eccles, who was Parsons then, and her colleagues. We're talking late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
And it started with a really specific question. Why weren't girls choosing STEM fields as much?
Ah, the STEM gap.
Yeah. And it wasn't just, an academic puzzle. It was really fueled by what was happening in social cognitive psychology, understanding how our beliefs shape what we do. Plus, you had the women's movement challenging all those traditional gender roles. It tapped right into that.
Okay, so that initial puzzle, the gender gap in STEM,
Right.
what were the sort of key intellectual ingredients that fed into Eccles' early thinking?
Well, her time at UCLA as a grad student was really crucial. She was deep into social psychology.
Like what specifically?
Attribution theory was big, how we explain success and failure, and also the idea of agency, our feeling that we can actually do things, make things happen.
Right.
And then, like I said, the women's movement was pushing for a totally new way to understand women's motivations, the barriers they faced. It actually led her to co-edit a special issue for the Journal of Social Issues, looking at sex roles, for men too.
And what was her background before that in terms of motivation theories? Was she building on existing stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So Parsons was actually a PhD student of Bernard Wiener,
Okay.
and Wiener himself was a student of Jack Atkinson at Michigan. Atkinson was a huge name in motivation theory.
Ah, so there's a lineage there.
Totally. Grounded in those classic theories, Atkinson, McClellan, Wiener. But interestingly, Wiener, even though he was Atkinson's student, was already starting to question some of Atkinson's work.
Oh.
Well, things like its reliance on projective tests. And it didn't seem to explain women's achievement very well.
Right.
So Wiener developed attribution theory. And that got Parsons thinking more about the cognitive side of motivation, our thoughts, our beliefs about our abilities. That became super central to her own model later on.
Fascinating how those threads weave together. Social psych, classic motivation theories, the societal questions about gender, leading to the first version of the model. What did that look like?
The first version, Parsons and her colleagues published it in 1976. It's pretty broad, actually.
Okay.
Had four main components. You had cultural norms and expectations.
Right.
Current situational stuff, like potential discrimination. Then socialization, family, school influences. And finally, the individual's own attitudes, values, behaviors. But because they were focused on college women and gender differences back then,
Yeah.
the examples they used were really centered on those gendered experiences.
Okay, so that was the starting point. How did it evolve from there? What were the next big steps?
Well, a really significant thing happened when Parsons moved to Smith College.
Okay.
She got much more involved with developmental psychology. So thinking about how motivation changes across childhood, adolescence.
Adding that developmental piece.
Exactly. She was influenced by work on attainment value, how important doing well is to us. And she started thinking about how schools might affect boys and girls differently as they get older.
Makes sense.
And then this was critical. She had these conversations with a student, Susan Goff, led to a really important paper in 1980.
Parsons and Goff, 1980. Why was that one so significant?
Oh, it was foundational, really. They went right after Atkinson's theory, which was dominant then.
Okay.
They pointed out, look, this doesn't explain women's achievement well. And the definition of incentive value is just too narrow.
How did they see it differently?
Instead of just being like the opposite of expecting success, they argued it was a separate thing. It had multiple parts. They were really the first to clearly lay out different components of task value. Things like attainment value, utility value. How useful is this task for my future goals?
Right, practical usefulness.
Yeah. And whether the rewards were intrinsic, just enjoying it, or extrinsic, like getting something for it.
Okay.
And they also brought in the idea of costs, especially for women, thinking about balancing family and career.
Okay.
And they suggested people have this hierarchy of values, which might differ between groups.
Wow, okay. That sounds like a major leap forward for the theory. So what happened next?
Well, about 3.5 years later, Parsons moved again, this time to the University of Michigan.
Back to Michigan.
Yeah. And she started working with her grad students there to really refine the model further.
With a specific focus?
Their goal was understanding that gender gap in math participation. They actually got funding from the National Institute of Education for it.
Okay.
And then in 1983, the first really comprehensive chapter laying out the whole model came out.
Mm-hmm.
Parsons, now Eccles Parsons, and her students co-authored it.
And what did they call it then?
Initially, they called it a general model of achievement choice. They explicitly said it drew on both expectancy and value theories.
Right.
It wasn't until later that the name Eccles et al., Expectancy-Value Theory, or EEVT, really stuck.
Got it. So, EEVT, what were the core elements of that initial, more fleshed out model?
Eccles Parsons and the team basically broke it down into two main chunks.
Okay.
There's the psychological component that's about individual agency, our beliefs, motivations.
Yeah, they're the internal stuff.
And then there's the socialization component that looks at the influence of social structures, the people around us.
Parents, teachers, culture.
Exactly. And it's interesting, even though the theory ended up having a huge impact on educational psychology,
Yeah.
the original aim was actually more rooted in social, motivational, and developmental psych. They were trying to grasp these broader factors behind population-level differences in choices, especially between girls and boys.
Okay, let's dig into that first part then, the psychological component, the agency piece. What are the core ideas there?
So the central idea is pretty intuitive, actually. Your performance, the choices you make,
Mm-hmm.
they're most directly influenced by two main things.
Which are?
Your expectations for success on a specific task.
Okay, can I do this?
Right. And the subjective task value STV you place on that task, especially compared to other things you could be doing.
Is it worth doing?
Exactly. Now, both of those expectancies and STV, they aren't just floating there. They're shaped by more specific beliefs you have.
Like what?
Like your self-concept of your abilities, just your general sense of how good you are at something, your goals, your overall sense of who you are, your self-schema, and even emotional memories tied to similar activities.
Okay.
And those beliefs, in turn, get shaped by how you perceive other people's attitudes and expectations towards you,
Right, what others think.
and how you interpret your own past wins and losses.
It's quite interconnected. So you mentioned expectations for success and self-concept of abilities. Are they basically the same thing in the model?
Well, theoretically, no, they're distinct. Performance expectancies are about a specific upcoming task, like how well do you think you'll do on this exam next week?
Got it. Future-focused, specific.
Right, whereas self-concept of abilities, or SCA, is more general, more stable. How good are you at math overall?
Okay, I see the difference.
But, and this is important, empirically, when researchers actually measure these things with surveys,
Yeah.
the questions designed to tap into expectancy and SCA often end up clustering together statistically. They're highly related in practice.
Ah, okay. So theory says distinct. Data often says they hang together.
Pretty much. So often in research, SCA kind of stands in for both.
Interesting. Okay, so that's expectancies and SCA. What about the other big piece, subjective task value, STV? You said it had different parts.
Yes. Four main components. First, intrinsic value.
Simple enjoyment.
Exactly. Do you just like doing the thing itself? Second, utility value.
Usefulness.
Right. How useful is this task for your current goals or your future ones, like taking a course because you need it for your career?
Makes sense.
Third is attainment value. This one's a bit more nuanced. It's about the importance you place on doing well on the task.
Okay. How is that different from intrinsic?
Well, attainment value has become increasingly linked to identity. How important is being good at this to who I am or who I want to be? Does it confirm something about myself?
Ah, okay. Like, being good at math is important to my identity as a smart person.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And it becomes more tied to personal and social identities over time.
Got it. And the fourth component.
The fourth one is perceived cost.
Mm-hmm.
This is basically the downside, the trade-offs.
Okay.
And cost itself has several flavors. There's effort cost. How much work will this take, and is it worth that effort?
Right.
There's opportunity cost. What else could I be doing with my time and energy that I also value?
The FOMO cost.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
And then there's psychological cost. Like, what's the emotional price of potentially failing? Anxiety, embarrassment.
Okay, so effort, opportunity, psychological costs.
Right. Those are the main ones initially identified.
So when I'm deciding whether to do something, my brain is kind of unconsciously weighing all these values, intrinsic, utility, attainment, against all these costs.
That's the idea. It's this complex, maybe not even fully conscious calculation. What's the overall subjective value to me?
Right.
And feeding into all of that are other individual things.
Mm.
Your specific goals, your self-image, how hard you think the task is, your general feelings about it from the past, how you interpret your performance history,
Mm-hmm.
and crucially, how you understand the messages you get from people around you, parents, teachers, peers, your socializers.
And you said the theory initially focused more on the individual's interpretation.
Yeah, the early emphasis was really on how the individual perceives and interprets their world. But that's softened over time, with more explicit recognition of how culture and context directly shape those perceptions and opportunities.
Okay, that leads us nicely into the other side of the model, the social structure and socialization piece. What's
Yeah.
involved there?
So if you look at the visual model, the left side deals with the broader social world.
Oh.
Initially, it was, well, a bit simplified. Just boxes for the cultural setting, often emphasizing gender and socializers like parents and teachers.
But it's gotten more detailed since then.
Oh, absolutely. A lot more work has gone into fleshing that out. There's detailed writing, for example, on exactly how parents influence their kids' expectancies and values.
Specific parenting practices.
Right. And similarly for schools, looking at teacher behaviors, the classroom climate, teaching quality, how much autonomy students get, all these things impacting motivation.
It sounds like it started with a really solid, well-formed base, but research has added a lot of layers.
That's a good way to put it. The reviewers of the article we're drawing on actually asked about that was it well-formed from the start or built along the way.
And the answer was?
The authors felt it was largely well-formed initially, but definitely acknowledged a developmental process. Research findings absolutely shaped its evolution.
Speaking of findings, that first big NIE-funded study you mentioned, starting in '78, what came out of that? Did it change things?
It was huge, really groundbreaking at the time, using surveys and observations, looking at students, parents, and teachers to understand these gendered choices.
And the findings?
Well, for one, it provided strong evidence that students' expectations for success and their subjective task values really were distinct factors, statistically.
Okay, so that supported the core theoretical distinction.
Exactly. They were positively correlated. People tend to value what they think they're good at, and vice versa. But there were separate constructs.
What about the different types of value?
They also found that the three STV components they measured back then, interest, like intrinsic, importance, attainment, and utility, also factored separately.
Okay.
So kids could distinguish between liking something, thinking it was important, and seeing it as useful.
And what about expectancies versus self-concept of abilities? You said they often cluster together.
Yes, and that study confirmed it. Empirically, expectancies and SEA tended to load onto the same factor, even though the theory sees them as conceptually different.
Right, the theory versus measurement issue again. And how did these factors actually predict outcomes, like performance or choices?
So a later study, Mies and colleagues in 1990, looked specifically at math.
Yeah.
They found that students' expectations for success were the strongest predictor of their actual math performance later on.
Okay, belief predicts result.
But the importance they placed on math, the attainment value, was the strongest predictor of their intention to keep taking math courses in high school.
Ah, so different factors predict different things. Expectancy, performance, value, choice, intention.
Exactly. Which really highlights why you need both sides of the equation, expectancy and value, to understand achievement-related behavior.
And given the initial focus on gender, what did these early studies reveal about boys and girls?
Well, they pretty strongly confirmed that girls' and boys' views of their own abilities often lined up with gender stereotypes, math for boys, reading for girls, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And not just their beliefs, but how they explain their successes and failures, their attributions, often reinforce those stereotypes too.
Yeah, so.
Parents and teachers were actually observed giving different feedback. Boys succeeding in math, often put down to talent. Girls succeeding, more likely attributed to hard work.
Wow.
And even in classrooms, teachers interacted differently with boys and girls in math, even when their performance was the same, like calling on boys more often.
So the environment was actively reinforcing these different beliefs.
That's what the data suggested. It really supported the hypotheses about where these gender differences in motivation came from, not just internal, but shaped by these subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, messages from the social world. It showed the power of having a model that looked at the whole picture.
That initial wave of research sounds incredibly rich. Did anything unexpected pop up? Anything that sent the research in a new direction?
Oh, absolutely. A key moment was when Alan Wigfield joined the research team around 1981.
Okay.
Wigfield had a really strong interest in the developmental side of motivation. And while EEVT wasn't initially focused on how things change over time,
Yeah.
a finding from that first big NIE study really sparked something. They noticed this general decline in kids' math motivation between 5th and ninth grade.
Okay, a drop off.
Yeah. And it's particularly sharp right around the transition from 6th to 7th grade, the move to junior high.
Ah, the middle school transition strikes again.
Exactly. And this finding clicked with other work happening at the time by researchers like Simmons and Blythe, showing similar negative shifts in kids' well-being during that same school change.
That transition period is definitely a big upheaval for a lot of kids. How did the Eccles team try to figure out why motivation was declining then?
Well, they suspected it wasn't just random. They thought it might be linked to systematic changes in the school environment itself when kids moved to junior high.
Right, different school, different experience.
So to test this, they launched a big longitudinal study. They followed about 3,000 students, collecting data within their classrooms twice a year as they went from elementary school into and then through their first year of junior high.
Wow, tracking them through the transition.
Precisely. This let them see what changes happened during the school year versus what changed specifically across that summer transition.
And what did they find?
Just as they suspected, the biggest drops in self-esteem and beliefs about their academic abilities happened right between the spring of 6th grade and the fall of 7th.
Okay, the transition itself was the key period for that drop.
It seemed to be.
Yeah.
And while self-esteem kind of bounced back a bit during 7th grade, their beliefs about their math and English abilities and how much they liked those subjects actually kept going down through 7th grade.
Ouch. And did gender differences play a role?
Yeah, the gender differences in ability beliefs pretty much continued to follow those typical stereotypes.
Okay, so the kids' motivation took a hit. What about the teachers in classrooms? Did they look at that side too?
They did. They assessed the teachers' beliefs and classroom practices both before and after the transition. They found some pretty consistent differences. Compared to the elementary teachers, the junior high math teachers tended to be more controlling, less trusting of student capabilities. They used more social comparison in grading, had less confidence in their own ability to teach effectively, and the students saw them as less supportive and caring.
That sounds like a less nurturing environment overall.
It does. And here's the kicker. In classrooms where those changes in teacher beliefs and practices were most pronounced,
Yeah.
that's where students showed the biggest declines in their math expectancies, their self-concept of abilities, and their task values.
Wow. So the changing school environment was directly linked to the drop in student motivation.
That's what the data strongly suggested. It wasn't just the students changing. The environment they moved into was fundamentally different, and often in ways that seemed to undermine their motivation.
How did they wrap this up theoretically? How did it connect back to the main expectancy value theory?
Eccles and Midgley introduced this really influential idea of stage environment fit.
Stage environment fit. Okay.
The basic idea is that for healthy development, you need a good match between the developmental needs of kids at a certain stage, like early adolescence, and the opportunities and demands of their environment, like the school.
And the junior high transition was often a mismatch.
Exactly. Early adolescents are developing needs for more autonomy, more connection, feeling competent. But they were often moving into schools that were less supportive, more controlling, more focused on comparison. That mismatch, they argued, was undermining motivation.
So it wasn't really changing EEVT itself, but applying it to explain this developmental phenomenon.
Precisely. It was like an extension, or you could even think of it as a kind of mini-theory nested within the larger EEVT framework, a way to make sense of these specific developmental findings.
And you mentioned this had policy implications too.
Huge ones. These findings, along with similar research, were a big part of what fueled the Carnegie Council on Adolescent Development's recommendation in 1989.
Which was?
To move away from the traditional junior high model, which often just felt like a mini high school, and towards creating dedicated middle schools designed to be more developmentally appropriate, more focused on creating that positive stage environment fit for young adolescents. That report really shifted how people thought about organizing schools for that age group.
That's a significant real-world impact. So after tackling that crucial adolescent transition, where did the developmental focus go next?
Well, the logical next step was to go even younger, to understand when these motivational beliefs and values actually start to emerge in childhood.
Back to the beginning.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
This led to the Childhood and Beyond Study, or CAB.
Okay.
The goal here was ambitious: tracked the development of expectancies in STV across different domains, academics, sports, music, right from kindergarten through 12th grade.
Wow, long term.
Very. And they even followed a subset of these kids into their early 30s to see how these early motivations linked up with their career path later on.
Any caveats about the sample?
Yeah, it's important to note the initial CAD sample was predominantly white, about 95%. So generalizability needs consideration.
Okay. So what did this massive longitudinal study reveal about motivation in childhood?
Several really key things. First, kids differentiate between their self-concept of ability, am I good at this,
Yeah.
and their subjective task value, do I value this, really early on.
Oh, we're early.
By first grade, they could already see distinct patterns, and this differentiation became even clearer as kids got older.
Interesting.
Second, within each specific domain, like math or sports or music, kids' ability beliefs and their values form distinct factors. So you could be good at math but not value it, or vice versa.
Okay. What about things like anxiety?
Interestingly, anxiety didn't show that same domain-specific pattern. It seemed to be a more general feeling across different areas.
And what else?
Third, that positive link between feeling competent, SCA, and expecting to succeed got stronger as kids aged.
Makes sense.
And so did the links between those ability expectancy beliefs and the different parts of task value. They become more interconnected over time.
Okay. Did they see declines over time like in the earlier studies?
Well, the earlier reports from CAB did show general declines in beliefs and values across elementary and secondary school. But more recent analyses of that same data and other newer studies show the picture is actually more complex.
How so?
It seems there are more varied patterns of change, not just a simple downward slope for every one or every belief.
Okay. And gender differences in this age range?
Generally, the findings mirror the societal stereotypes: boys higher in math sports beliefs, girls in reading English. Although interestingly, in this particular CAB sample, the gender difference in math beliefs seemed to decrease over time.
Okay. And how well did these early beliefs and values predict things way down the line, like college or career choices?
They found pretty clear predictive links. The trajectories of change in kids' ability beliefs and task values from elementary through high school were related to their later course choices in college, their career aspirations, and even the actual careers they ended up in.
So, like, if your math beliefs decline steadily.
You were less likely to end up in a math-related career.
Exactly. What about parents? Do their beliefs matter?
Yes, definitely. Research using the CAB data found that parents' beliefs about their kids' abilities influenced how engaged the kids were in different activities, even after controlling for the kids' actual competence levels.
Wow. So parental belief has its own impact.
It seems so. And they also found evidence for a kind of bidirectional influence. Parents' beliefs affect kids, and kids' engagement and performance affect parents' beliefs. It's a cycle.
That's complex. Did Wigfield offer any insights into the developmental order of things, like which values emerge first?
Yeah, based on the CAB data, he proposed a likely sequence. Intrinsic value, just liking something, probably comes first.
Makes sense for young kids.
Then attainment value, as kids develop a clearer sense of self and what's important to them. And finally, utility value, as they start thinking more concretely about the future and how activities connect to goals.
Interest, then importance, then usefulness.
That seems to be the general pattern. And he also found that the strength of the relationships between these beliefs values and later outcomes tended to increase as kids got older. They become more predictive over time.
It's fascinating how these developmental studies really grew out of unexpected findings and the researchers' curiosity, adding whole new dimensions to the original theory.
Absolutely. It really shows how research can be dynamic even when you start with a pretty well-specified framework.
Okay, let's fast forward to today. Where does this theory, now SEET, stand in the grand scheme of educational psychology? How influential is it?
Well, it's definitely still a major player, highly influential.
How can you tell?
Well, you see it featured prominently in special issues of top journals, like Contemporary Educational Psychology, dedicated specifically to it, or major motivation theories. It's in all the big theories handbooks.
Okay.
And the citation counts for the key articles like the Eccles and Wigfield 2020 review or the Wigfield and Eccles 2001 are just enormous. Thousands and thousands of citations worldwide. Researchers are clearly still engaging with it heavily.
After 40-plus years, that's impressive. Why do you think it has such staying power? What do people find valuable about it?
When junior colleagues were asked this at the review article, they pointed to a few things.
Yeah.
It has clearly defined concepts. It's testable, at least its components are. It comes with decent measures.
Important for research.
Crucial. It emphasizes both the individual and the context. It's comprehensive, covers a lot of ground, and importantly, it's relatively easy to use and explain, even to educators who aren't deep in motivation theory, that accessibility matters.
So the core ideas are still strong. Have there been significant updates or refinements to the constructs themselves recently?
Yes, definitely. There's ongoing work elaborating some key concepts. Take attainment value.
The importance piece.
Right. There's been a growing emphasis on connecting it more explicitly to identity development.
Mm.
How central is success in this task to my sense of who I am, my
Wow.
gender identity, my ethnic identity, other core aspects of self?
Okay.
That link to identity is seen as increasingly important, although it's still an area needing more focused research.
What else has been elaborated?
Cost, that's been a huge area of recent activity.
The forgotten component, some called it.
Exactly. For a while, it didn't get as much attention as the value side, but researchers like Flake, Gaspard, Perez, and others have really pushed to develop better measures for cost and to understand its different dimensions more deeply.
What kind of new dimensions?
Well, refining the initial ideas, like Flake separating effort cost required by the task versus effort needed to overcome negative perceptions. Gaspard looking at how emotional and effort costs might merge. Bamer distinguishing between cost you anticipate versus cost you actually experience.
Oh, okay.
Song looking closely at the overlap between emotional psychological cost and anxiety. And really important work now, like from Matthews and Wigfield, proposing the idea of racialized opportunity cost.
Racialized opportunity cost. What's that?
It draws on work by scholars like Tabrin and Venza Chambers. It's the idea that for students of color, particularly in predominantly white spaces, part of the cost of achieving might involve sacrificing aspects of their cultural identity or enduring microaggressions.
Wow, that adds a critical layer.
It really does. But the upshot is there isn't full consensus yet on exactly how many distinct components of cost there are or the best way to measure them all. It's very much an active, evolving area.
And wasn't there a debate about renaming the whole theory because of cost?
Yes, that's right. Barron and Hulleman suggested calling it expectancy-value cost theory, or EVC,
Based on...
based on findings where costs sometimes seem to act more independently, forming its own factor separate from the positive values, and sometimes showed stronger links to ability beliefs than values did.
Makes sense. What was the counterargument?
Eccles and Wigfield pushed back a bit, arguing the evidence wasn't quite strong enough yet for a full rename. They pointed to other studies where costs still seem to fit under the broader umbrella of task value in factor analyses, and suggested that how cost relates to value might actually depend a lot on the specific context, like is it a high-stakes exam versus everyday homework?
So the jury's still out on the name change.
Seems that way for now. It's an ongoing discussion.
What about the socialization side? Any updates there?
There's been tons of writing and research on how school experiences, teacher relationships, grading, school structures impact SCA and STV, but that hasn't quite been systematically integrated back into the main visual model yet.
Ah, the diagram hasn't caught up with the research.
Kind of. And similarly, the model of parent socialization is also currently being revised to incorporate newer findings.
Okay, which brings us to the actual name change that did happen from EVT to Situated Expectancy Value Theory, SEVT, in 2020. Why the shift to situated?
Two main reasons were highlighted. First was the growing prominence of situative perspectives on motivation in the broader field.
Theories emphasizing the immediate context.
Exactly. Now, the proponents argue the expectancy value model always considered the situation. Even that first 1976 version mentions situational factors.
Right.
But the renaming to CEVT was meant to really foreground that, to make it explicit that all aspects of the model, the decisions, the actions, the options available, the skills, the perceptions, are inherently situated, influenced by the specific context you're in at that moment.
So the old name maybe didn't capture that emphasis enough?
Perhaps the visual model, Figure 1, could sometimes look a bit global, a bit decontextualized. The name change reinforces that context is key throughout.
It's interesting, though, because situative often comes from a different theoretical tradition, right? More Vygotsky, sociocultural.
Yes, and Susan Nolan made that point. Situative approaches often have different underlying assumptions, different epistemologies, than more individual-focused psychological theories like EVT.
Can they work together?
The authors seem to think so. They acknowledge the different traditions, but see potential for collaboration, as long as researchers are clear about their perspectives and find common ground.
Okay, so that's reason one, emphasizing the situation. What was the second reason for the SCV name?
to more clearly emphasize the role of culture.
Ah, okay.
Again, the original model had that sociocultural and historical nature of life box way over on the left. And the early work focused heavily on gender, which is deeply cultural.
Right.
But the move to say VT was partly to signal that cultural influences aren't just background noise. They permeate the whole process. Researchers are encouraged to look at various cultural factors beyond gender and how they shaped beliefs and values.
Like the work on racialized cost you mentioned.
Exactly. Matthews and Wigfield use that as an example, elaborating the cultural milieu for Black children, thinking about systemic racism, segregation, specific racial socialization messages. How do those broad cultural forces shape the more proximal processes in the model?
So culture isn't just at the start, it's
Yeah.
woven throughout.
That's the view.
Yeah.
The limitation has perhaps been in how it's depicted. The plan is actually to release a new visual model, in their upcoming book. Something more multifaceted, maybe more like Bronfenbrenner's ecological model, to better show how expectancies and values are embedded within multiple layers of environment and culture.
That sounds like a helpful update.
And the idea is that the immediate socializer's parents, teachers, are themselves influenced by that broader sociocultural context and by the child's own characteristics, age, sex, race, etc.
It all interacts.
Right. It's this accumulation of processes that leads to each person being uniquely positioned. And as Nolan pointed out, individuals also actively shape or co-create the contexts they're in. It's a two-way street.
Has this shift to CEVT actually changed how people are doing research yet?
It seems to be sparking some new directions. You're seeing symposia at conferences using this EVT name,
Okay.
with researchers focusing more on measuring things in specific situations, looking at short-term variations, really trying to capture that context dependency.
But it's still early days.
Yeah. There's still a need for more studies that go beyond just basic demographics and really analyze the features of the situation itself. And the hope is it will encourage more collaboration with those situative researchers we talked about.
Reflecting on this whole journey of the theory, what broader lessons about developing theories come out of it?
Well, the authors highlight a few things. Being really sensitive to research findings, both the ones that confirm and the ones that challenge or nuance the theory.
Don't ignore the data.
Right. Being willing to change or elaborate your constructs based on evidence. And even updating the theory's name can be useful to reflect how the field is evolving.
What about testability? Complex theories like this are sometimes criticized as being hard to test.
They acknowledge that testing the entire model all at once is basically impossible. It's too big. But the argument is that you can validate the individual constructs. You can test specific links and pathways within the model. It's more like building up the evidence piece by piece, brick by brick, like how self-determination theory has developed. You gradually figure out which parts has strong support.
Okay, that makes sense. So looking back over its whole history, what would you say are the major contributions of EV-EVT?
Oh, quite a few. First, it's just provided a really powerful framework guiding decades of research on how
Nice.
expectancies and values develop and why they matter for kids' choices and performance.
Huge research impact.
Absolutely. Then there's the policy impact. We discussed the stage environment fit research, contributing to the middle school movement. That's pretty concrete.
Yeah, changing school structures.
And third, a really significant contribution is in the area of educational practice through intervention work based directly on the theory.
Right. You mentioned interventions. Tell me more about those. What kinds have been developed?
A lot of the focus, especially from researchers like Hulleman, Harakiewicz, and their colleagues, has been on boosting utility value.
Making learning relevant.
Exactly. Designing activities or prompts that help students see how what they're learning in science or math connects to their own lives or future goals.
And does it work?
The results have been really promising. These interventions, even relatively brief ones, have been shown to increase students' interest, boost their performance, and make them more likely to take further courses in those subjects.
That's great. Does it work for all students?
What's particularly encouraging is that these utility value interventions seem to be especially beneficial for students from backgrounds often underrepresented in STEM, like first-generation college students or students from minority groups. They've even been shown to help close achievement gaps in some cases.
Wow. And the effects last.
There's growing evidence for long-term impacts on persistence in STEM pathways, even years later.
How do they think such brief interventions have such long-lasting effects?
Several mechanisms are proposed. Maybe it triggers a positive recursive cycle, feeling more connected makes you try harder, you do better, which boosts your confidence and value.
A snowball effect.
Right. Or maybe it triggers other changes, like seeking out related opportunities. Or maybe it helps students learn broader habits of mind about connecting learning to their lives. So probably a mix of things.
Has intervention work focused only on utility value?
That's been a major focus, yes. Partly because it seems relatively straightforward to intervene on. But researchers are definitely suggesting extending this to other STV components.
Like what?
There's been successful work on cost reduction interventions, helping students manage the perceived difficulty or emotional cost of subjects like physics.
Okay.
And there's talk about developing attainment value interventions, perhaps by helping students see how success aligns with their core identities or personal goals.
So lots of potential there.
Definitely. But a key takeaway seems to be that you really need to tailor the intervention to the specific students you're working with, their age, their background, their specific needs and challenges. One size probably doesn't fit all.
Makes sense. Okay. So if we were to list the theory's main virtues using those classic philosophy of science criteria, what would they be?
All right, let's tick them off. Scope. It's incredibly broad. Along with self-determination theory, it's arguably one of the widest-ranging motivation theories in EdPsych. It tries to explain a lot. Unification. It does a good job pulling together ideas from social, developmental, educational psych, different motivation constructs, socialization influences.
Yeah.
It connects a lot of dots.
Okay. Parsimony. Simplicity.
That one's debatable. It's not simple. From a complexity theory view, maybe that's a virtue. Motivation is complex, but it's not parsimonious in the traditional sense.
Fair enough. What about accuracy, plausibility?
Very high, based on the sheer volume of research supporting its core constructs and relationships. Decades of studies back up many of its premises.
Fruitfulness. Does it generate new research?
Hugely fruitful, constantly sparking new questions, no hypotheses. It's expandable, and as we just discussed, it's led to a ton of practical intervention work.
Internal consistency. Coherence.
Seems pretty strong. It's been developed carefully over time, and the pieces generally fit together logically, supported by data.
Mechanisms. Does it explain how things work?
That's still an area of active exploration. How exactly do people weigh values? What are the precise cognitive processes? How do socializers exert influence? The theory points to the factors, but the fine-grained mechanisms are still being worked out.
Testability and specificity.
We touched on this. While the whole thing is untestable at once, its specific constructs are measurable, and many specific predictions can be and have been tested. So yes, in that sense.
Analogy. How does it relate to other theories?
It definitely shares common ground with social cognitive theory, attribution theory, goal orientation, SDT. But direct head-to-head comparisons are tricky because they often focus on different constructs or levels of analysis.
And finally, practicality.
Clearly very practical, given the impact on interventions and thinking about things like stage environment fit.
That's a pretty strong report card overall. Looking forward then, what are the big open questions? The promising next steps for SET?
Well, it's definitely not a finished story. Research continues to generate new topics.
Like?
More on that situated nature. How do values and expectancies fluctuate moment to moment, task to task? How does it connect with self-regulated learning? How does it function differently for various cultural or demographic groups?
Okay.
Eccles and Wigfield themselves suggest digging deeper into the interplay between the different value components. How does intrinsic value relate to utility value over time? And how do people form these hierarchies of values and ability beliefs across different domains?
Methodological challenges too.
Big time. There's a real need for closer alignment between the theory and the methods used. We need methods that can capture the complexity and dynamics the theory describes.
Measurement issues.
Still ongoing. Getting consensus on the best ways to measure expectancy, value, and cost. Updating attainment value measures to really capture that identity link. Agreeing on the components of cost. Figuring out if short, frequent measures give the same picture as longer traditional surveys. Lots to do there.
And you mentioned culture and diversity.
Absolutely critical. Much more research is needed on how culture, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, and their intersections shape motivation development.
Going beyond just comparing groups.
Yes, really understanding the processes. How do experiences of racism, discrimination, oppression impact expectancies and values? Connecting EVT with frameworks like critical race theory, as Matthews and Whitfield are starting to do, and really fleshing out those socialization boxes in the model with more diverse influences, and testing it all with more sophisticated designs, situated measures, complex modeling.
So still plenty of work to be done.
Definitely. SFD is alive and well, complex, relevant, but with many frontiers still to explore. It might even find synergy with things like dynamic systems approaches to really capture that complexity.
Well, this has been an absolutely fascinating deep dive. We've traced CEVITY from its origins, trying to understand the STEM-gender gap through its core ideas of expectancy and subjective task value, the psychological and social factors, its evolution over decades, the shift to situated,
Hmm.
its impact on research, policy, and practice, especially around interventions and those tricky school transitions. It's clear this theory offers a really rich way to think about why we do what we do.
It really does. And maybe final thought for listeners is to reflect on their own lives through this lens.
How so?
Think about your own expectations for success in different areas, the value intrinsic, utility attainment, cost you place on different activities. How might your own experiences, the messages you got, have shaped those? Could CEVITY help you understand your own motivations or maybe the motivations of people around you a little better?
A great question to ponder. It definitely gives you a framework for thinking about those things.
Thanks so much for unpacking all of that.
My pleasure.
I
It's a
thought
theory with a lot to offer.